The Data Chief is a podcast for data and analytics leaders to share their personal stories and insights on technology, culture, and leadership. Welcome to The Data Chief.
Welcome to The Data Chief. I'm your host, Cindy Housen. Today, we're joined by Anand Iyer, Senior Vice President and Chief Data Officer at Ecolab, a global leader in water, hygiene, and energy technologies. Anand is at the forefront of Ecolab's mission to make the world cleaner, safer, and healthier by transforming how data and AI are embedded across industries, from food and healthcare to high-tech and data centers. We'll explore how his team is scaling AI and IoT platforms, how real-time water monitoring is revolutionizing data center sustainability, and what it means to decouple business growth from environmental impact in the age of AI. Anand, welcome to The Data Chief.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate the introduction.
The Data Chief is brought to you by ThoughtSpot, the agentic analytics platform company that is redefining how the world interacts with data. With ThoughtSpot's intuitive natural language search and agentic AI, every user can access transparent, governed, AI-powered insights when and where they need them. Learn why industry leaders like Cisco, Toyota, Hyatt, and Capital One rely on ThoughtSpot. Experience the new era of analytics at thoughtspot.com.
Where in the world are you joining us from today?
I'm in Pennsylvania this week, but my office is in St. Paul, Minnesota, but I'm in Pennsylvania this week.
Okay, beautiful countryside, I think, near where you are, yes? And Minnesota, I think a lot of people think of it in winter, but I've learned that it's like the biking capital of America, a good place to be practicing data and AI. So Anand, tell us a little bit about your role as SVP and Chief Data Officer at Ecolab. What does your day-to-day look like?
So me and my team are responsible for all the data that we have in the organization, whether it's master data or all the transactional data that we pull. And then we're also responsible for building all the analytics, advanced analytics, and AI technologies that are used by our functions internally to optimize operations, and also technologies that we build that our customers use that generate digital revenue for Ecolab. And so essentially all the chemistry that we have can be used to optimize how these customers leverage our chemistry and then ultimately improve their top line and their bottom line.
You talk about the top line and bottom line, and you recently gave a talk externally about having a value-first mindset. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Cindy, thanks for that question. So when you think about something that's got so much hype as AI, it's very easy to get lost in that hype. And there's a lot of pressure from boards and from executive leadership, CEO down, to be able to use AI to solve every single problem, whether it is an AI problem or not. So how can we solve this problem with AI? And so a few months ago or a year ago or so, it was all about Gen AI and ChatGPT. Now it's all about how can you use agentic AI and use agents and so on. And so there's also this huge fear of missing out. If I don't start AI initiatives right away and show progress, then I'm missing out and I'm going to be seen as not progressive enough or not cutting edge enough, which is all good. It's all good in terms of the focus and the dollars and everything else. But one thing that people sometimes forget is that end of the day, it's all about, are we either saving money or making money? Right? And are you able to show that in the bottom line or the top line in a measurable way? Right? There's got to be a straight line between the initiative and where it's actually impacting the top line or the bottom line. Because all the things around soft benefits and type 2, type 3 benefits are all great. But end of the day, it has to start showing up as either a type 1 savings or a actual attributable increase in the top line, which then impacts the bottom line. So those are things that the CFO and the CEO ultimately will want to see. But the key is to be able to really identify initiatives that you can actually draw a straight line between the initiative and where it's impacting from a dollar standpoint. I always want to bring it back to what specific problem are we trying to solve and how will we measure the value, right? In some cases, it's a very nebulous value that you got to be more efficient. Well, what does that actually mean? Does that mean, so we hear about this co-pilot and that co-pilot and it can give you a 5%, 10% efficiency. Does that mean that we can do this with 10% fewer people and we can redeploy those people to other initiatives? But it doesn't mean that. Then what does it actually mean when you say you're 10% more efficient, right? So if you have a team of people performing a certain function, 100 people, and you're saying it's going to be 20% more efficient because of use of AI or ChatGPT or whatever else, then are we able to say that we can redeploy 20 people to some other function that we wanted to use? Or does it mean that we still have the same 100 people and they just have bits and pieces of time left and we can't really do something with it? And if that's the case, the latter is the case, and there's really no straight line between the initiative and any dollars that is impacting. So that's where my head's at, right? That if you want to have a seat at the table, you got to be able to talk in terms of what the value is in terms of dollars. But the point is, if you cannot point out how a specific AI initiative is either impacting the top line or the bottom line or SG&A, then it's going to be very difficult to have a sustained conversation with any C-level leader and have that impact.
Totally agree here. And I think there's a couple things. We're not short of use cases for AI. We're probably short of focus, I would say, and applying that value-first mindset is important. I often say to leaders, also take a baseline before you deploy something and look at the before and after to show that value, whether it's operating efficiency or top-line revenue growth. But I would say that it's been a challenge for many chief data officers because before, early on in the CDO role, they were viewed as a cost center, least cost to serve, and not really as a business efficiency, business growth driver. If I think about Ecolab, you have a mantra, a mission statement, innovation that leads to impact that is very much tied to hard business benefits, whether it's extending the life of an assets or reduce packaging waste. So does that make the path easier that everyone in your org knows you have to focus on the hard business benefits? What do you think?
I don't know if it's easier, but because there's still the excitement that everybody has. Everybody wants to be associated with an AI project in some shape or form. I think what's definitely true is that in our organization, with the focus coming from the very top, that we have to be value focused is definitely very helpful. Right. So when we look at even customer initiatives, we talk about total value delivered to customers, even in our traditional chemistry sales, that what value are we delivering to customers based on the spend that they have with us? And so our leadership always talks to customers with that lens. What have I done for you and what value has that delivered in terms of environmental impact or water savings or energy savings or reduction of waste and operational improvement and so on. So the bunch of parameters we look at. And these are not just some soft data points that we shake on. It's really actual hard dollars that the customer agrees that we've actually directly impacted. And in some cases, there's a closed loop value that we create in terms of how the contracts are structured as well, right? So in terms of what value we've created. So these are all contractually validated in terms of value created. We have a strong rigor in ensuring that we go through the intake and prioritization process. And one of the things in prioritization is to be able to figure out what is the actual value and how will you measure it? So to answer your question, the value conversation is always a hard one because in some cases, the value is intangible. But when it comes to in the case of digital revenue, it's easy. If you have a digital product that you've created that's driven with AI and agents and the ability to have an assistant and so on, the dollars that it generates is directly attributable to that product. When it comes to internal initiatives, whether it's automating internal functions around AR, AP, or source to pay, or any of these functions, it's really attributable to either redeployment of headcount, which is direct dollars, SG&A savings, or in terms of a direct reduction in our cycle time for cash collection or any of those other things that we do, which can be done with AI. So these are all directly attributable. So the mindset that we have as an organization is that, and I push as well, is how do you actually create these value pillars early and often so that any initiative, before it actually gets into a development cycle and validation cycle, goes through this validation before it even becomes an initiative that we spend dollars on and start spending time, energy to build these AI models and then to test them, validate them, and all of that, right? So that's all stuff that is validated well beforehand.
Early and often is a good practice, I think, for this value-first mindset. Anand, as I think about your background, you also are an architect and an engineer at heart. And you talked about the FOMO of Gen AI, which is real. How do you bring this engineer mindset to prioritizing which use cases you go after?
Yes, thanks for that question. Think about my job is to solve problems, right? Which means that I have to first understand what the problem is. And when you look at how, when I even talk to young engineers and train them how to think, like the first thing I tell them is that the most important thing is to understand the problem and not try to solve something that you haven't fully understood. Like, don't jump into solving, try to understand the problem. If you can articulate the problem well, that's half the battle. And so in most scenarios, when people come to you with a solution already in mind, I always take them back saying, okay, what are you trying to do? What problem are you trying to solve? What outcome do you want? And how will you know you've reached that outcome? So these are a few questions that you think I ask, right? First of all, it's good to know what outcome you want. But then the follow-up question that people usually don't ask is, how do you know you've gotten that outcome? How will you validate that outcome? Like someone might say, I need a secure solution. Well, what does that actually mean? How will you know it's secure? I'm trying to understand, how will they validate it's secure? Right? So if I say, well, I need to automate this process, how will you know it's automated? What is your metric for ensuring that or validating that you've automated something? Right? So when you start asking those type of questions and you start getting into the realm of understanding the problem better, understanding the outcome better, and then trying to understand what is the right solution for the problem. So to use the often used expression that you don't want to walk around with a hammer looking for a nail, right? You really want to understand what are they trying to do. So rather than undertake these complex and projects which are using some newer technologies that are not fully mature yet, they're still maturing. New things are coming up on a daily basis from technology creators. You see on a daily basis some of these large major technology creators investing billions of dollars in building new AI technology. So the space is going to continue to evolve fast for the foreseeable future. So a problem that needs to be solved from scratch today might already have a ready-made solution 6 months from now. So these are all things that we have to keep in mind. So that's why it's important the mindset of a solution-focused person, whether it's you building an AI solution or you're building a non-AI solution, has to be similar. You got to understand what problem you're trying to solve, what's good enough in terms of the solution for the problem you're trying to solve, how are you going to validate that the problem actually has been solved, and then you can look at what are the right options for solving it.
That's a good approach. And you shared a fun analogy with me using WebMD, and is everyone a doctor now? Do you want to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, so I have a number of friends who are physicians, and one of the things they always tell me is that it's becoming harder to practice medicine now because everybody has access to these ChatGPT tools and WebMD and all sorts of other resources. And the first thing they do is go and search up their symptoms, and patients do that. A lot of patients do that. And then they come to the doctor with a specific diagnosis and a recommendation, and a treatment option. And clearly they didn't go to years and years of medical school. So they spend 15 minutes on the internet. And so it's a much harder job for the doctors to convince them that they don't have a deadly disease or they don't need a specific course of treatment, because there's so many other factors that you got to look at, right? So again, I'm not saying it's that dramatic in my world, because I don't specifically deal with patients or anything, but in my world, you always have people coming to you with a specific solution, saying, I want to use this particular large language model to do this specific thing because somehow they played with it or did something with it. And then we also have our partners, and you gotta love our technology partners, where they're also trying to promote self-service AI, and you can just do it yourself. And while a lot of that is true in many cases, you still want some kind of governance and structure on enterprise solutions you want to build in your organization. If you're going to use AI for major functions like order to cash or a source to pay, and these are things that directly impact your bottom line and connect with enterprise systems like your ERP backbones and so on. I don't want people who are not trained in technology to just build on-the-fly AI solutions, right? Somebody told me this phrase the other day, that in the old days you would say garbage in, garbage out. But in the AI world, it is garbage in and disaster out. The scale is a million X. So if you have a human performing a function and they make a mistake, you could maybe make a mistake in a day with 50, 100 invoices. But if you have an AI agent doing it, you can do it for 1 million invoices in a day. And then you basically in a point where you can't correct it. So I still feel it's important for the technology professionals to be mindful of how we can deploy these technologies and not cause chaos. So at the same time, you want to ensure you're encouraging innovation and productivity and so on. But when it comes to enterprise solutions that have significant impact in terms of the scale and scope of impact, you can't get away from still having good practices of engineering in terms of good DevSecOps and all of that. That still needs to happen. You can't MLOps and DevSecOps. You can't just throw models into production, hopefully they work, right? So those are not things that we can do. So that's where I think this tug of war between people wanting to use self-service AI and citizen development is always going to need balancing with what's an enterprise solution that touches enterprise systems that need much more deeper governance and security and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it ready? So you've given me a new tagline, garbage in, disaster out. I hadn't heard that one. We definitely don't want that. We do want data that's ready enough to be leveraged. I would say generative AI has put a greater focus, not just on the structured data, but the semi-structured data as well. And I don't think we've had the same level of governance practices there. But I want to come back to a point that you also mentioned around people change management. Are the people ready for a particular innovation? And how would you advise leaders to ensure that it's not just about the tech, it is also about the people, and bring them along on this incredible innovation wave?
Yeah, so end of the day, any technology we deploy, in most cases, impacts people. Even if it's an autonomous technology, it's automating things that people were previously doing. And there's always going to be a need for some human in the loop, where some can be completely automated, some human in the loop, even to validate what is done by the AI technology. So in the past, it was all about telling people what happened. And that was what reporting was. They tell you what happened last week, last month, last year. Then you started getting into a little more predictive analytics of, I can tell you what might happen. And as you get more advanced with computing and AI, we're starting to get into the realm of what might happen and what should you do about it. And you start injecting some of the large language models where they can actually tell you, generate new content, meaning they tell you what needs to be done. And the agentic AI on top of that can actually do it for you. And so when you look at this, and I'm just simplifying it, so it's a simple paradigm. So in each of these areas, you can think about what is a person on the ground going to experience in terms of how their job is changing, and what should they know? How can they be more effective? Because at the end of the day, you could put in the best technology, but the people who have to operate it don't know how to operate it right, and then feed the learning back into this model that you can continually improve. Over time, the performance of the model will degrade. And then the moment people start losing faith in the predictions, or, well, it's only half right and you can toss a coin and be half right, then you start having adoption issues or just general lack of trust in the technology and so on. And that's really where you want to be very watchful in terms of ensuring that you're thinking about the change management up front. You're thinking about what's going to happen with how this technology is going to get utilized. Whether it's an internal use case or a customer digital use case, you got to think about the customer, right? I always think about when you have a solution that's being designed, always have a chair for the customer. And how is the customer going to experience this technology, and how their life's going to change? And what do you need from a feedback loop back from them? In some cases, people look at the thumbs up, thumbs down, whether to answer your question or not, and they can give some additional feedback. And then how do you incorporate that into improving your models and so on? So you have to think about that, and just in terms of how the human in the loop will engage with the system, how they will provide feedback, and then even the offline reviews that happen and so on. That's really critical. If you miss that, then you end up putting technologies that are either not utilized or are utilized heavily upfront, but then over time, the confidence just erodes and people start thinking, yeah, this is a cool toy, but not really a business-ready solution, right? So for instance, if you might be able to use Copilot to generate an email for you and so on, but if you constantly get gibberish in terms of what the email is, at some point you're going to say, well, this doesn't make, if I have to spend 20 minutes correcting the email, I might as well just write it. So you have to understand what the consumers are trying to do and what specifically you're trying to help them with. So in the case of, let's say, large industrial settings where there's complex equipment, what we're trying to do is to be able to replicate the knowledge that a 15, 20, 30-year-old, 30-year experience veteran has with those technologies. So someone who's been around those complex technologies for 20 plus years has a level of expertise and experience that they bring to the conversation, that they've seen so many different varieties of use cases. So how do you provide that level of expertise to a 2-year experience rep that they can then basically, they have the knowledge that they have, plus they can phone a friend in terms of the AI helping them saying, have you thought of this and that and the other thing? So how do you replicate that knowledge that a few people have with decades of experience across a larger set of people who can have access to that expertise? And it's got to be, when I think about these 3 phrases, right, that right information to the right person at the right time, they all have to be true. So if you give the right information to the wrong person, that doesn't really help. And if you give the right information to the right person at the wrong time, that doesn't help either. And obviously, if you give the wrong information, then all bets are off totally anyway. So all 3 things have to come together in terms of, and all this falls back into change management. Unless you understand how your consumers are consuming the technology, and the right information, right insight, or right action at the right time to the right person, doesn't work.
Yeah, so change management, and it goes back to your point, what's the problem you're trying to solve? You also mentioned self-service, and I know you're a big advocate for self-service data. What are some lessons learned here? And take us a little bit through what your tech stack looks like to achieve this.
Yeah, so self-service analytics is really something that I'm a big fan of, where it takes the IT people out of the business of creating more and more reports that people maybe rarely look at. To think about a typical scenario where somebody requests a report and somebody in IT goes and asks for requirements and goes builds it and then tests it and delivers it in a few weeks, maybe sometimes in a few months. And then somebody looks at it a couple times and then the requirements change, and then either they come back and ask for a different report or they just stop using it. And so I've been in organizations where there are thousands and thousands of reports, whatever technology you build them in. And I don't know how many reports people actually look at. Thousands of reports seems like a lot. And there were self-service technologies in the past, but I think the maturity has come to a point where by marrying AI and conversational AI into this, previously, even self-service analytics tools required the users to have some idea of the data structures behind and be able to navigate the data structures. And that was feasible in some cases, but in many cases, you're not going to teach SQL and other things to a wide range of people. And even if they're trained on it, you're not always sure they're getting the right answer because, how much can you train a person on all these technologies? So with the introduction of some of these self-service analytics tools combined with the AI, conversational AI, people can actually ask English language questions to the data that they have access to. So we've deployed ThoughtSpot technology to be able to provide self-service analytics to our teams where they have access to the data. They can have conversational questions. And we've also incorporated the data security aspects to it, where if you were to ask, what are my sales for the last quarter? I already know who you are. I already know what you have access to. And if you're a rep in, say, New Jersey where you're at, then I'm going to give you data that's specific to New Jersey. And if you were to ask a question saying, what are my sales in Europe? The answer would be 0. Whereas if the GM of the business asked that same question with access to the global data, they would get access to, and then you can slice and dice and have follow-up questions. So I think the game changer was the ability to combine conversational AI with some of these self-service analytics tools where people could just ask English language questions and get data, and then they could then use it, and then they could save those queries. And so the key is, first of all, taking the IT folks out of the chain. When someone needs access to data, they can get access to data. And the second aspect is that the learning curve in terms of the complexity of knowing the data structures is gone, where they can just basically ask a question and get information. So that's where I'm heavily pushing my teams to expand the use of self-service analytics. My goal is that in exceptional scenarios, we will create reports and so on that's needed. But if you need access to data, you have access to data.
So it sounds like as well that this is not the self-service analytics of yesterday, which was a little bit bordering on anarchy, a lot of different versions of the truth, maybe sitting in desktop applications. It sounds like you've cracked the code for governance as well as personalization, that each rep sees only what they should see or want to see. Did I get that right?
Right. And also the key is to have certified data sets that this can operate on. And that's a very important aspect, because if you don't have, so as the chief data officer, my job is also to ensure that I'm providing certified data sets that people can work with. And so if you have people accessing data that's not certified and getting insights and taking action, then it can be quite dangerous from a business standpoint, that you're making business decisions based on data that's not accurate. So while many organizations started with a proliferation of hundreds of data marts and people trying to build their own data sets and holding on to them, divisional data sets or departmental data sets and so on, while there's some value in the acceleration and the decentralization of that, the bigger danger is that you may be operating on data sets that are not accurate. And if you're going to make business decisions that impact how you're going to invest money or spend money or what projects to start and stop based on wrong data, then you could be making wrong decisions. So a lot of the enterprise data sets, whether it's sales data or prospect and other types of data, product sold data, financial data, all that is what I consider enterprise data assets and certified data sets. Similarly, when we're performing AI and all those kind of solutions for customer data, where we collect data from customers on these complex IoT devices and so on that we have, those are data elements that we protect and hold sacred, because we're actually making very specific decisions on what actions to be taken based on that data. And so the sanctity of the data, and so the data has to be homogenized and has to be standardized in many ways, and also correlated with so many other different parameters that we have. So for instance, I'm giving you a specific example so you can make that connection that, like, for instance, we have connected dispensers, which dispense soap and other products. And these are IoT enabled. And if I get a signal from a dispenser that it's out of product, but I don't know where the dispenser is, it's useless. So think about a Marriott hotel in New York or some other city, and it's a 20-story, a 10-story hotel. And if I get a signal saying there's a dispenser somewhere in the building that's out of product, how useful is that? You're not going to walk around the whole building trying to figure out which one it is. So then you got to understand where the asset is, or even other complex assets like a cooling tower. A large industrial complex may have multiple cooling towers. So which cooling tower is it, and how are you tagging it? So all this asset information and all that is critical in making sure we have the right data that we're using. So even when you have self-service analytics or they have AI, have a clear understanding of what certified data sets you have and how are you building your analytics and your AI and everything else on top of that is critical.
With IoT data, it sounds like, too, what you're describing is getting to a very fine-grained level of detail that also, I would say, legacy tools did not allow. You need to know exactly which room or restroom or which tower rather than some aggregated view.
Yes, and so aggregated views are also helpful because they can, for the purpose, the use case might vary. You're trying to understand trending of utilization, that might be a different use case. But if you want to take a specific action, then you need to have more specific details about that specific unit that you're talking about. Right. So we have AI dish machines. Dish IQ is our platform that optimizes the use of a dish machine works in a restaurant and optimizing the life of that dish machine. And so dish machine is one of the most critical assets in a restaurant, because if a dish machine breaks, you can't basically serve food, right? So, because you don't have dishes. So in a restaurant, are solutions that can ensure that the dish machine is operational and effectively operating at all times is a critical solution in a restaurant. So the signals that we get from the dish machine, making sure there's preventive maintenance and it's operating at the right level, operating with the right product and so on, right temperature, all these things impact the quality of the output, so that your plates are shiny white when they come to your table and they're not like stained brown. Right? So there's so many factors that go into it in terms of the hardness of the water, what specific product that goes into the temperature it runs, how long it runs, and so on. So in this scenario, our ability to make sure that particular dish machine is operating at the highest efficiency level depends a lot on all the data that we get, how we correlate it, and how we're able to take action or prompt the users to take action to keep that going.
I also want to probe on, you talked about before data teams might have been report factories, thousands of reports, waiting weeks and months. So the technology has changed to make it easier for people to self-service. How much do you think it's also now a business forcing function? I just cannot imagine anyone waiting a week or a month for a report. The business environment, the economy is just so much more volatile these days. What do you think?
No, absolutely. Think of government mandated changes to policy or how we charge customers or the price of goods and so on. There are things that happen that are completely out of our control that can decide. It can disrupt supply chains, can disrupt there's global events without going to specific events. And all of us see all these global events panning out, and they disrupt supply routes, they disrupt the availability of raw materials, they disrupt the timeliness when it's available, they disrupt logistics to ship finished product. And so all of these things, right? And so these things are happening at a very rapid pace. And so when these things happen, your chief supply chain officer or your chief quality, all these individuals who have to make these decisions that essentially impact your ability to make, sell product, and then collect money. If you're not able to react in near real time and be able to adjust, that can make or break the company and the ability for you to stay in business. Maybe you learned a lot through COVID, where in a very short period of time, people learned how to be effective remotely when everybody was remote and the world continued to function, and we did that. So all these things will keep happening. Hopefully, we all hope and pray for a very peaceful and stable global environment, but we don't control it at the macro level. Like, we don't influence it at the macro level as individuals, but then we have to still deal with the fallout of all these global events. So the role that data and analytics and AI plays is the ability to give business leaders access to impact and what they should do in a very timely manner so that they can minimize any impact to business.
Yeah, we need to move fast. Well, Anand, you've shared so many great insights in how Ecolab uses data and AI and the value-first mindset, the right tool for the right use case and user. Let's shift to a lightning round, fun, rapid-fire questions. Outside of work, what do you enjoy doing when you're not immersed in data and AI?
I enjoy reading, and I also enjoy cooking, and I enjoy exercising. So these are the three things I like doing. And I like cooking, and I definitely I've been a fitness enthusiast all my life, so I enjoy working out. I'm one of the few people who actually likes to work out.
Yes, rather than a necessary evil. Well, favorite meal to prepare?
I like to try different cuisines, right? So I'm a vegetarian myself, but then I have a very wide range of cuisines I can make, and I'd like to try new things, and so I'm always trying something new.
Okay. How about a book or a podcast that has had a big impact on you?
The book that's had the most impact in my life is a book called the Bhagavad Gita that I read quite regularly, and actually keeps me quite grounded in terms of, all the changes that's happening around you, and how do you still stay grounded with focusing on what's important.
Good. We'll link to that in the show notes. And as you like to work out, what's your favorite workout routine?
Yeah, so I've lifted weights since I was a teenager, so I still keep doing that because it's something that I enjoy. And recently, about a couple years ago, I got into stationary bikes. And I always enjoyed biking outside, and I always thought biking indoors it's kind of lame. But I started getting into it, and it's a lot. And the great thing about it is that you can do it year round. You don't have to worry about whether it's raining or it's snowing or whatever. You can still do it and get a pretty good workout. And so my idea that stationary bikes are for wimps went away quickly after a couple of classes that I took, and I was totally wiped out. And so I started enjoying that quite a bit.
Same. I tried a spin cycle class. It just about killed me, even though I'm a jogger. If you could work remotely from anywhere in the world for 1 month, where would that be?
Well, I've never been to the Himalaya mountains, but I would think if I could be waking up and looking at these majestic mountains every day for a month, and that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
That would be quite beautiful. And you can choose the last one depending on your mood in the moment. Either something that has made you laugh out loud recently, or what are you most grateful for, maybe beyond the obvious of health and family?
Yeah, I think I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to have an impact in an area, in a field where it's exciting to work in. Right. And it's a privilege to have a leadership role in a space where there's so much happening, there's so much hype, people are interested in it. So I definitely view that as a privilege, and it's exciting to be able to work in an area where there's so much interest, and it's also exciting. And so I feel that's something I'm very thankful for. It's not something I take for granted, and I really appreciate the opportunity to work in an area and provide thought leadership in areas where the thought leadership is still developing. So I clearly don't know everything, and I wake up every day reminding myself of that I really don't know everything, as things are happening all the time. And so that's what I'm thankful for, to have the opportunity to work in this pretty exciting area of AI and where all the action is from a technology standpoint.
I feel the same, Anand. Thank you so much for being on the Data Chief podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciated the conversation, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Data Chief as we explore data and AI leadership. To continue your journey, subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening platform and connect with me on LinkedIn or X at BI Scorecard. If you are loving this podcast, please rate or review it so others can also discover the podcast.
The Data Chief is brought to you by ThoughtSpot, the agentic analytics platform company built for everyone to create personalized insights, drive decisions, and take action. Learn how companies like Lyft, Brambles, and Navan are leading the way at ThoughtSpot.com.